Vantage Performance Podcast. I'm Phil Dobbie, and this time, the 10 guiding principles to successful turnarounds. How do you ensure that your company, if it's struggling, comes out the other side as a business that is going to survive and prosper? Well, it can be done, of course. In fact, it's done all the time. And Michael Fingland, the Managing Director of Vantage Performance, helps make it happen with his team. Of course, doesn't do it by himself. So welcome again, Michael. And let's look at those 10 guiding principles. So the first one, and look, I think, we've sort of covered this from different angles before, but there's got to be a one or two big changes in the strategy. Just making a few shifts here and there is not going to create a successful turnaround.
Very rarely. Occasionally, and I mean 5 out of 100, the crisis that you're solving might be a temporary liquidity issue, where it is a tweak here and there. But generally speaking, and we've talked about this before, 50% of the success for turnarounds is closing what we call the confidence gap, and that's getting the key stakeholders supportive of where you're at, supportive of the changes, the advisors you've got involved, and supporting the plan. And often what's got you into the situation is you haven't made some big strategic decisions in the last 1, 2, 3 years. So there needs to be 1 to 2 big changes in strategy to change the perception, if you like, to and then build a plan around that. And it may be a capital raise, it might be a merger, it might be exiting out of certain regions, it might be growing a part of the business. So there are a lot of things when we talk about big changes in strategy. It may be condensing you might have too many customers and they're losing money, so you might need to cull 30% of your customers, but you'll end up being a lot more profitable.
Yeah. Like a big customer who's you work on very low margins for, but you keep them in there because they supposedly bring in a great deal of money, but they also create a great deal of expense for the business.
That's right. And unless you do that, unless you're looking for those 1 to 2 big changes in strategy, invariably you will not rebuild the confidence that is crucial to any turnaround.
Right. Okay. Number 2 is to create a 100-day cash runway.
Yeah, this is critical, and in our model, and what's been very, very successful for us is you have to have a parallel focus in that first few weeks. Whilst you're doing that strategic review to work out how we got here, what are the 1 to 2 big changes in strategy, etc., you need to have a parallel focus typically on cash. And our view is when we go into a situation, we need to be comfortable that we've got enough initiatives in combination with management to create a stable platform for at least 3 months. And the key thing there is one, you need to take some pressure off while you need some space, you need some headspace to think about these big decisions and how we're going to sell the plan to all the key stakeholders. But typically speaking, most businesses have a 90-day cash cycle from when you buy your materials, whatever it might be, manufacture, sell, collect the cash. It's 90 days. So when you start putting new initiatives in place, it's going to take 90 days, sometimes to 120 days, for the business to start showing the impacts from an earnings and a cash flow point of view. And that's why you need to have that stability and that confidence that you've got at least 100 days to have the confidence that you're going to get through those various flashpoints that invariably are there.
But if you're making changes, you might also need more cash, mightn't you, as part of that change process?
Yeah. So a big focus in that first 100 days is how do we create more cash internally, and this goes to the heart of rebuilding stakeholder confidence. Is you need to demonstrate to your financiers and shareholders that you've exhausted all other avenues before you go and put your hand out. And unfortunately, too many boards are too quick to say, "Oh, we'll just go to the bank and ask for more money," or we'll tap our shareholders for more equity. You need to demonstrate that, because in every situation we've been into, and I mean every, there's always been cash that's tied up in working capital. You've got lazy debtors, you've got lazy stock, you've got terms with your creditors you can renegotiate. That's just one part of it. Non-core assets, surplus assets, that you might need to sell to get greater utilisation out of the fleet, for instance. There's always opportunities to free up more cash. There are some opportunities to restructure loan facilities, bring in new finance in that first 100 days, and we're always looking at those opportunities. But when we do that, we always demonstrate to our financiers that we've exhausted all avenues internally, so we can cover that off. So they're not... we're going to them as a last resort, if you like, and not taking the easy option.
Right. The easy option often as well is to get rid of some of your highest paid staff. which could be a bad decision, because presumably they're getting a decent salary because they're doing something which is seen as contributing a great deal to the organisation.
Exactly, and look, redundancies for us is the last resort, absolute last resort, because you want to avoid taking capacity out of the business. Because if you can hold on to your workforce through a downturn, where your competitors might be slashing 20-30% of their workforce, if you can hang on to them, and there's some pretty clever things you can do to maintain the workforce and not cripple cash flow, you will come out of that downturn. If you've got 30% more capacity, you've got 30% more people out there winning work, producing, looking for ways to innovate products. You will come out and take market share.
Yeah, absolutely. Grab the share while it's there. The third one is stakeholder management. Now, you reckon this is the critical part of it all, about half the job.
Yep, easily 0.5%. And this is where most turnarounds fail, whether they're simply led by boards and the management team themselves, or if they have indeed brought in advisors to help, they spend insufficient time on closing what we call that confidence gap. It is 50%, literally 50% of the time that we spend on a job in that first 1 to 150 days or more is dealing with their stakeholders face to face, because it's human relationships 101. If you need to rebuild confidence, you cannot do that over the phone. You cannot do that in between other initiatives. You have to spend significant time face to face building relationships, getting their trust. It's the heart of selling, and it's critical in a turnaround, and so that's why we spend so much time with them, because you've got to close that confidence gap. And whenever we come into a situation, or any business finds itself in a critical situation like that, confidence and particularly from financiers in the management team is at an all-time low, because they've typically broken 3 or 4 forecasts or promises to creditors, and you need that circuit breaker and that focus to try and rebuild that support. Otherwise, you're just not going to have sufficient support to get through the process.
Yeah, well, they're worried, and they're assuming if you've got this far down the track, it's just going to continue the death spiral, I guess, and you need just to convince them otherwise. So then number 4, look, you normally do fairly well, Michael, at avoiding acronyms, but even you can't help yourself now. So the SCPPE model, tell us what that is. Yeah,
it's our own proprietary model that we've developed over the years, and we keep adding on an extra letter every year, so that the acronym's going to become its own word. But at the core of it is a fundamental belief that to have a viable, successful, sustainable business, you need the right strategy, a powerful strategy, the right capital to fund it, and the right people to execute that strategy. And what's often lacking in a turnaround is one of those 3 circles, because you've got to have all 3 working in unison, with a powerful why or purpose driving, at the core of that, which is what are we in business to do? What sort of big problem are we trying to solve? That's your why. But you've got to have the right processes in place, systems and processes. And we've done a lot of work over the last few years, particularly around the environment in a workplace. So you need those 3 core drivers: your strong purpose and the systems to make sure you can see if the plan is working, KPIs, management dashboards, all the rest of it. But the environment is so critical, and I'm not talking about the physical working environment. I'm talking about the psychological environment within a workforce, and it is a significant contributor to whether a business really outperforms its peers, or whether it just becomes an also-ran or potentially fails. And it's what I mean there is around, is there a culture of trust in the organisation? Do people genuinely have each other's back? And Simon Sinek, many people will have heard of Simon Sinek. He's a big believer in this, and that you can take a second-rate management team or employees in terms of university degrees. That's what I mean by second-rate. You can take people that don't have as much experience or university degrees, put them up against a business that doesn't have all that. But if you've got that right environment where people trust each other, they know what their job is, they know what their responsibilities are, they know how they fit into the entire piece, and I'll touch on something in a second, and they know that what they do is meaningful and is making a change. If you do that, you will have the most powerful workforce working for you and working for each other, and that gazumps the smartest management team every day of the week. So, and particularly in a turnaround situation, you can get significant boosts in productivity, culture, morale, reduction in absenteeism, all those things by having a dual focused on the environment in the workplace.
So when did you last add a letter to your SCPPE model? What was this? Did you add one a year? I'm looking at what you've got every 6 months, because you haven't got trust in there, so you've got to add T on the end of it, haven't you?
We debated that, but we think, that's part of the E, so,
And then you said people, purpose and processes, but you've only got 2 Ps.
I know.
So, it's the SCPPPE model as far as I'm concerned, but as you say, that's just getting ridiculous, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's too hard to remember.
Exactly. Well, the fifth one, here's another acronym, but at least I know this one, the USP. Every business is, it's so fundamental, isn't it? Everyone's got to have a unique selling proposition, but it's often forgotten in businesses.
It is, and often at the heart of turnarounds is the business had a strong USP, and it might be their why, their purpose. It could be one and the same thing. So they've either had it at one stage, and as businesses get bigger, it gets fuzzy because the entrepreneur, the owner who set it up, was powerful with disseminating that in the early years. As you bring on more people, if you don't instill the same understanding and passion, and you don't hire the people with the same amount of passion, it gets distilled and diluted as time goes on. So often in turnarounds, you've got to try and chart a course back to what was it that was unique about us, and really stood out, and did everyone in the business really understand it, and did it matter? Was it relevant? And do our customers really resonate with it? Sometimes we've got to create one, but often it was there. It was why they were successful, but it's just got lost along the way. So in that first few weeks when we're doing that strategic review, big focus on trying to identify what that USP is, and as the name suggests, a unique selling point. Sometimes there won't be a unique one where you're the only one who has it, but you might have a few points of difference which together create a USP. So, and then you roll that out across the marketing, across the sales team, across manufacturing. One of the things I was going to mention before is part of that SCPPE model is someone on a production line. They're in their own little bubble, producing bull bars or whatever it might be. Understanding that if they don't do their job properly, and the other 3 parts of the process ahead of them, if they don't pick up a small imperfection in the material, and it goes out the door to a customer, it then comes back as a sale return. That costs time, effort, money, and you've damaged a relationship with the client. So understanding that the quality of the work you do has ramifications on sales. So everybody in the business is in sales, whether you're in purchasing, manufacturing, packaging, trying to get them to understand they are all part of the sales process, and to have that eye for quality all the way through.
Right. So point number 6, and you made the point that very often this can be the same as the unique selling proposition, but it's not always. It's the why is the business there, or what's the purpose of the business. So that can be different from the USP, can't it?
It can be, and look, too often people say why or what is your purpose, and you've got to have values, and they think it's just words that you've got to have on a wall and in your vision statement and mission statement in your website. It's a waste of time, effort, and money because nothing ever happens. You've got to spend serious time working out what it is that makes this business tick, and is it relevant? And if there's one thing that our listeners take from this is go and read the book from Simon Sinek, which is Start With Why, and look on the TED website or on YouTube for videos around Simon Sinek. You will be amazed at the power of what it can do, and what we find, we integrate that into all of our assignments. And the key to it is to show management teams that if you get this right, it will drive sales, it will drive productivity, it'll drive the right people to join your workforce. But and that's when they get it, when they realise that this is not just something that a textbook says and management gurus say you've got to have a vision, a purpose, values. It's not. Too many people give it too little lip service.
Shouldn't it be obvious, though, for most businesses?
It should be, but
it
it's
obvious
not.
what they're about?
It should be, but it's not. It gets fuzzy, and they never articulate it properly. But I can tell you, if you get it clear, concise, and it's clear across your website, your marketing collateral, the way people talk, the way you recruit. If you recruit people who believe in the same sort of purpose that your business is about, you will have a much stronger workforce, which means more productivity, lower disruptions, and it's 50. Your selling will be done 50% for you. And once they get that, then the penny drops. Then they realise it's not just some chapter in a textbook that they can't see any relevance for.
Right, but when you get a whole load of people into a room and they all have different ideas and you sort of mold those together, so you have this incredibly long sentence which says, what we're all about, but it's actually 24 different things all amalgamated into one, then you've not done a job properly. It is one thing that you're looking for.
Yeah, and you've got to really condense it down. So our why, which is the whole reason our firm was created, because, as you know, I spent the first few years in insolvency and saw the carnage and the destruction that happens when businesses don't succeed. So our why is to improve the rate of business success. Now, to avoid all those things that might otherwise happen. Now, that resonates when you've got a director who's worried about their business, they're worried about all their personal assets, their marriage, all the rest of it, or a board is worried about their reputations and the business of which they preside over. Who do you want working for you? A management consultant who's in it for the money, a management consultant who, likes doing this sort of stuff, or someone who passionately believes in that cause. And so one, it's fundamentally who we are, but it's also aligned with what clients want to hear.
And I love the way that somewhere surreptitiously in the middle of these podcasts there is the thinly veiled Vantage Performance plug, and you do it so nicely. Number 7, pay down debt. You've got to de-risk the business, and the quickest way of doing that is getting rid of your debt, or paying it down anyway.
Yeah, but there is to be a balance to that. So it's not about selling too many assets or paying down too much debt, which leaves the business starved of capital. It's all about a balanced process. So in that first 100 days, 200 days, and this is all geared towards rebuilding stakeholder confidence, is that before they need to see that you've done the obvious things. Have you sweated working capital? Have you sold non-core assets that you're only hanging on to because one day you might use them? Get rid of those, because what they're looking for, it builds credit. It builds credit. You get points. As silly as that might sound, if the banks see you doing these things, you get credit. So when you do need to ask them for more funding down the track, you're more likely to get it. If you've done the obvious things up front to pay down debt, because if you can de-gear the balance sheet and reduce your gearing from 60 to 40%, and sometimes that's through selling non-core assets, selling personal assets, getting shareholders to put some money in, you totally reset their expectations and their confidence levels. So as I said, when you do need some more capital then to grow and to finish off the plan, they're more likely to then give you more capital because you've done the things that they think you should be doing first.
Well, you're talking their language, aren't you? I guess
you are.
They understand money. They don't necessarily understand your business or how you're planning to restructure it, because they don't understand the business that you're in, perhaps.
That's right.
Number 8 is sort of goes along with that, a strong financial management. You'd hope you'd have that in the business, but perhaps you don't.
Look, Phil, it never ceases to amaze me how many large corporates, let alone small, medium-sized businesses, don't have sufficient financial controls in place. And we're talking listed companies that don't have, what we would instill in an SME or a mid-market company, which is 30-week cash flow, 3-way forecasts, really concise management packs and management dashboards that are looked at on a regular basis. Simple things, really accurate functional job costing models. So when they're tendering for, say you're a construction business tendering for a large, multi, million, $10, $100 million project, whatever it might be, that they're either still doing it by memory and gut and experience, or the job costing model they're using has got errors and formulas riddled, errors riddled through the model that they weren't aware of. So they think they're pitching for a job that's going to give them a 35% margin, but in reality it's a 10% margin or whatever it might be. So really, it's often a key weakness in any business that gets into strife.
Yeah, and people looking at the wrong metrics and looking at sales, looking at revenue rather than margin, and that sort of thing. Or
a big one is having 20 KPIs that they're focused on when really there's only 3 that matter. And everything because once you focus and spend more of your time around 3, and which make up maybe 95% of the answer, you're putting a sufficient time, effort, and focus on those, and you're going to get much faster results.
Now, number 9, something dear to my heart, given my background is very much in marketing. Maintain that focus on marketing, and also research and development. You've got to look at what you're going to be selling next as well, of course.
Yeah, and just to alleviate any concern you might have there, Phil, these are in no particular order. So even though this is number 9 on the list of 10,
I assumed number 10 was the most important, and we were working up to it.
Yeah, no, these all have to happen in parallel. But yeah, it's a big part of it's a common one of the biggest mistakes, I should say, in that the easiest thing to cut when you get into a bit of a crisis is sales and marketing. And the simple analogy I say to our clients, and we do it as a team here, is to say, if you're going through an industry downturn, what would you rather be doing when you're emerging from that downturn? Still discounting the same old products, because everyone gets into this sort of race to the bottom. We keep discounting our products, and in retail for the last few years, there's a culture now of just continuous discounting. So what would you rather be doing? Continuing to discount products as you're emerging through a downturn, or releasing new products to the market? Because as you know, if you're releasing new products to the market, you can release them at a much stronger margin, you come through with new products, more innovation. You're coming out with new things that are different, interesting, and you're more likely to win market share. In fact, I can guarantee you'll win market share if you maintain a focus on R&D and marketing. You might need to make some changes and tweaks, but I can tell you, if you maintain more of that focus, you will get a jump on your competitors every time.
And if the downturn is an economic downturn, if it's affecting the whole country or even in the whole world, then that creates new opportunities. Actually, there's demand for new products that didn't exist before. If you're smart and you can tap into it,
it does, and it takes 18 months for innovation to sort of work its way through the pipe to a new product or service. So if you start reinvesting in marketing and R&D, once you're coming out of the downturn, you've still got the same old products and services for another 12, 18 months, and that's the critical period where you can get a jump.
Yeah, and in fact, so many big companies that are around today have come from those beginnings, of course, where there was a downturn, and they've come out of it shining. Number 10, and yes, this is so important, isn't it? Cultural transformation, and I guess even if a company is moving along well and there is a good culture, the moment things start to go wrong, that can destroy the whole culture. You start to have backbiting, you start to have office politics, and you've got to get rid of all of that stuff, haven't you?
Yeah, that's right, and it's almost the most important part of a turnaround. And why I say that is a lot of turnaround plans might give you the initial traction, the first 100 days, lots of people are excited, you've got confidence going again, you've got a stable cash flow, but most turnarounds fail. Or they start unravelling at the 100-day mark. And 12 months in, you're back to where you started, because there's insufficient focus on fixing the culture in the business. Now most management teams and consultants in this space don't give it sufficient focus. And, when we talked about our strategy capital people model before, the environment piece that we talked about, this is at the heart of fixing the environment in the workforce. So whilst you have to have a significant focus on changing the culture in the business to improve the environment, the critical mistake you can make is trying to do it too soon. And you can spend a lot of time and effort on trying to improve culture in that first 100 days or even the first 200 days. But if you're still making changes to the business, and unfortunately if there are some redundancies and whatever, and you're trying to do cultural stuff in between all that, you're just going to fall flat on your face, because people won't believe the statements you're making about what we're going to be like going forward. Yes, we're going to fix communication and we're going to respect our people and all the rest of it. It will fall on deaf ears if you're trying to roll that out whilst you're still, making their colleagues redundant. So whilst it is fundamental to any successful, viable turnaround in the long term, starting it too early can be fatal. So that's usually phase 3 for us. Phase 1 is that first 100 days, stabilise, come up with the right strategy, sell that plan to the key stakeholders. Phase 2 is the implementation of that next sort of 6 months, and then we bring the culture piece in around between month 6 and 9, once you've got that stable platform. And that's when you can really cement the new plan, because people then buy into it.
Yeah, makes perfect sense. Yes, those emails from the CEO saying, what a strong organisation we are and how we value our people. Oh, by the way, we're getting rid of some of them. Never goes down too well, does it? But we see it time and time again.
We do.
All right. Well, look, there's very wise words. 10 guiding principles to successful turnarounds. We'll do this again sometime soon. Thanks for your time.
Thanks, Phil.
And in fact, when we do come back, we'll be asking whether you need a chief restructuring officer. Well, obviously, if we're asking that question, we believe that you do if you are in a turnaround situation. But what would that person do and who should it be? We'll talk about that next time. In the meantime, of course, you can subscribe on iTunes or SoundCloud so you never miss an episode. Till then, I'm Phil Dobbie. Thanks for tuning in to the Vantage Performance Podcast. See you next time.